Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Our reading in the Old Testament and the New Testament fit well together because it shows how God works through human agency, oftentimes in the answer of our prayers and in bringing us comfort. In 2 Samuel chapter 22, we have this beautiful psalm that's written by David about how the Lord had rescued him from all of his enemies. And there's very um, descriptive language used here, very imaginative language used here to describe how the Lord had come to rescue him. It says in verse 7, "In my distress I called upon Yahweh, and I called to my God, and out of his temple he heard my voice, and my cry for help came into his ears. Then the earth shook and quaked. The foundations of heaven were trembling, and were shaken, because he was angry. Smoke went up out of his nostrils, and fire from his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens and came down with thick darkness under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew, and he appeared upon the wings of the wind, and he made darkness canopies around him, a mass of waters, thick clouds of the skies. From the brightness before him, coals of fire were kindled. Yahweh thundered from heaven, and the Most High gave forth his voice, and he sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning, and threw them into confusion. Then the channels of the sea appeared, the foundations of the world were laid bare by the rebuke of Yahweh at the blast of the breath of his nostrils." And he says there in verse 17, and he sent from on high, he took me and drew me out of many waters. And it goes on. It just really shows, how David truly gave all the credit to Yahweh, to God, for coming and rescuing him, and describes it as though God had heard his voice up in heaven and then took off flying for his rescue, and really turned the world basically upside down to rescue David and to pull him out of the difficult situation that he was in. But then as we get into chapter 23, we see that David had mighty men around him that the Lord used to help him in these various things. It talks about this one individual named Shammah, who had this great victory over the Philistines. And it says he took his stand in the midst of that portion and delivered it and struck down the Philistines. So Yahweh brought about a great salvation. So there's that tie between what Shammah did and then what the Lord had done through him. And one worked in correlation to the other. And so David, yes, had Yahweh who was helping him. And David always gave credit to God for his rescue and for his deliverance. But at the same time, it was recognized that there were these mighty men, very brave and very daring, who did wonderful feats for David and against the enemies of David that God used for his benefit. But then we see also in the New Testament, as mentioned in 2 Corinthians chapter 7, how God comforts through human agency as well. It says there in verse 6, "But God who comforts the humble, comfort us by the coming of Titus." And so just by the coming of Titus, Titus had good report from the church of Corinth. They had received Titus well, but they also had high regard for Paul, and that comforted Paul. But he says here that God who comforts the humble, comfort us by the coming of Titus. And so we can see in our reading today, what really comes out is that yes, God gets the ultimate credit for the things that he does for us, but he oftentimes uses people to do that. And so that ought to encourage us to be looking for how the Lord is using people in our lives to reach us, whether to encourage us, to comfort us, to strengthen us, to give us that timely word that we need, to be looking around at the people that God is using to benefit us in our lives, but also to be those people who are the ones who benefit others. That is, that we pray to the Lord and seek opportunities for us to be used by God for the betterment of other people, and to realize that God can actually use us too to do great things for other people. And so hopefully our reading today will help us to understand this and to have this impressed on our minds so that we can be looking for God's hand at work through other people, but also God's hands work through us, so that people can be benefited and strengthened and encouraged and comforted, and to receive the things that they need from God. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do a reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the videos today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.